Welcome back to another installment of Real Talk. This is part 2 of our car chase coverage. I'm John Walker, your host. With me as always is Norm Wergler. How are you, sir?
Doing great. Ready to go.
We wanted to mention before we got started the films that we covered in part 1, in case you haven't seen it. Be sure to go back and watch it because there's a lot of great stuff in there. We talked about Thunder Road, Grand Prix, Bullet, The Italian Job, and Vanishing Point. All are really good films. All I would highly recommend that you watch. And a lot of them had a lot of really powerful cinematography. I mean, this is stuff that shooting a car chase has to be really difficult to do. And there was a lot of techniques that were pioneered in these films, and also there were a lot of people who they drew influence from.
In 1936, Leni Riefenstahl was given carte blanche by Adolf Hitler to film the 1936 Summer Olympics in Munich, Germany. And when she, I think it was Berlin, when she did all of this, she pioneered some of the dolly and tracking and different kinds of shots that hadn't been done that much before. So she was really, because she had carte blanche, money was no object.
Right.
She became terribly influencing on photographers afterwards and directors. She was a director and a photographer. So we find that you could ask any of the DPs that we talked about today, or in our other episode, we'll talk about today, what influences they have, and her name will come up.
And I would imagine that it's probably, you know, it's sports, so there's a lot of action, a lot of movement, and so I'm sure that a lot of the techniques and the things that she used were easily transferable to doing some of these films.
Yes, indeed. So you get a chance to see Olympia. It came out, it was released in 1938, but it was filmed in 36. It'd be worth watching because it does some very interesting things.
So there's our German connection, but now let's jump to our French connection.
Good thinking there.
French connection with Gene Hackman. Also Roy Scheider, we did not mention in the credits that are going to come up, but they're cops who find out that this drug cartel basically from France is sort of importing heroin into the United States, and they're trying to stop them. And the scene that we'll watch from French Connection is Gene Hackman chasing the actual L train with the drug dealer on board. And we cut out some of the drug dealer scenes because the drug dealer, it was just too long, and so we stuck with keeping just Gene Hackman, but we got Gene Hackman driving, chasing this train, and supposedly they did this without any permits or any permission, which again, do not try this at home. But they shot this on the streets of New York without anybody knowing that this was happening, and supposedly there was an actual car accident that you'll see in here live where a guy was just going to work and he had no idea that they were filming this scene, and Gene Hackman, or the driver for Gene Hackman, crashed into him and they had to buy his car. So let's take a look now at the French Connection and see if we can spot it. I don't know if it gets any more realistic than that because, I mean, it wasn't staged. They just drove a car through the city and crashed into people and didn't mean to. But again, we're seeing this evolution of the car chases becoming, more complex and more realistic, and then we'll kind of stray from that because we've reached the pinnacle and now we're going to go beyond it. But I mean, the cinematography in this was great. Owen Reutzmann also did The Exorcist, Tootsie, Network. I mean, these are all blockbuster films.
Yeah.
If you could have any one of these under your belt, you would be considered a success.
Absolutely. And I imagine somewhere out there someone's thinking, well, okay, part 1, part 2, what about editing? That must have been a nightmare editing some of these things, as you know, because you helped edit these scenes for us.
It was interesting editing because you got almost kind of a behind-the-scenes look of possibly how they did it, because you've got all this footage.
Yeah.
Me just trying to piece together stuff that they had already cut. I can't imagine, especially with a sort of guerrilla-style car chase like they did, trying to edit this together with, did we get enough coverage for that? Are we okay? Especially when they hit the guy's car, they didn't even know. I mean, once you've got that, it's done. There's nothing you can do. You can't go back. And so I'm sure that was hats off to Jerry Greenberg for editing that film, because that was it's seamless. I mean, it looks like it's something you would see in any other Hollywood film where it's all planned out. Our next film is Mad Max 2, The Road Warrior, which a lot of people don't know that this is a sequel. This was just titled The Road Warrior, but it's actually the sequel to the indie feature Mad Max, which was a huge success. I believe it was Mel Gibson's first film, if not one of his first films.
The first film was, the first Mad Max was his first big film.
And that sort of introduced the Hollywood-going audience to Mel Gibson, and then he comes back for this one in the sequel, directed by George Miller. And this is also a very intense, the game again. I mean, we've only jumped ahead, I believe, 10 years, and already the bar is now jumped even higher, as we'll see in this, with multiple cars, all kinds of action, gunfights, car bombs.
It's got everything you could ask for, except dancing.
Yes, true.
But this is the first of a trilogy, I believe, of post-apocalyptic Australia filmmaking, and really gave Australian films a good kick in the start.
And it's weird because the third film is Mad Max 2 Beyond Thunderdome, which it's got 2 in the title, but it's really 3, so it's kind of confusing. But be sure to check out Mad Max, The Road Warrior, which is what we're going to see right now. that's a pretty intense film. It's basically the future, and there's no gas, so these marauders are chasing Mel Gibson and the people he's kind of teamed up with to get their truck full of gas, and it's really great. You've got to check out those films. They're a must-see. All the Mad Max movies are really entertaining, and I can't say any more about them, or enough about them, I should say. Our next film, we're going to jump ahead probably 20 years. Because the next film, there were so many films in between this, like we said in part 1, that we couldn't do all of them.
Right.
And so what we did is we decided to jump on to one that, again, it's kind of embedded in that realism. This necessarily, what we just saw with Mad Max, not necessarily realistic. You're not going to see too many people shooting guns or throwing Molotov cocktails out of their car. So in this one, this is The Bourne Identity with Matt Damon, where he plays Jason Bourne, who was a spy that sort of had amnesia, lost his memory, and wakes up, and suddenly he has all these abilities he doesn't know that he had, but he does. One of them is driving a car through the streets of, I can't remember the town where they're at. Was it Paris? Yes, Paris. But amazingly, and by glancing at a map and knowing exactly where he's going to go.
I wish we could all do that, don't you?
Yes, I definitely need my GPS.
I was thinking this GSP would go crazy.
Yeah.
Turn left, no, right, no, left, no, right. Oh, okay.
So let's take a look at the Bourne Identity and see what we're talking about. It's pretty intense stuff. Again, that's a ultra realistic. There was just something, I don't know if it's necessarily just the editing or because the cars are more normal cars, they're not these souped up sports cars or something. There's just something, it just seems more gritty and more real, and Sarkline did an amazing job of editing. Also, Oliver Wood was the director of photography for this film and all the other Bourne films. I wanted to jump back really quickly. Speaking of director of photography, Mad Max 2, Dean Semler did also Dances with Wolves, Academy Award winning, and Apocalypto, which is a mouthful. That was Mel Gibson's Mayan apocalypse film, which is a really good film. Not one word of English spoken in the entire film, but it's worth watching. It's really good. But
yeah, well, I was going to say what's interesting is the more we study these things, the more you and the audience begin looking at them again, you'll discover that directors find teams that they like to work with. As you pointed out, John Powell and Oliver Wood did all of the Bourne Ultimatum movies with Doug Liman, and Spielberg, of course, that team with his DPs, and with John Williams, for example. They begin to able to sort of think as one, and being an editor has got to be difficult. So you need some direction from your directors as well.
Yeah, I mean, you see that a lot where the same people start to work together in teams, and the other films that we're going to do also, it's the same thing. They have people that they always have worked with, that they've come to trust. I mean, you're under tight deadlines, there's a lot of money at stake, so you definitely want to make sure you're working with somebody who, like you said, finishes your sentences, knows what you're thinking, knows what you want, and is able to achieve it at the time you need it.
Which we can point out when we come to the next one.
Yes, the next film is my favorite of the group that we're going to do. This is Death Proof from Quentin Tarantino, which this movie is definitely not safe for all audiences. Do not watch this with your kids. Most of these films, I didn't mention at the top of the show, what we've had to do for these sequences is edit them all down for time, because the car chase sequences, I mean, they're just too long. They were averaging 4.5, 5 minutes apiece. We've been doing multiple shows. We've already had to break this into 2 segments because of the amount of time it's taken to do this. But if we kept the entire sequence length, we would be doing 10 episodes. So I know you don't want to see that many.
And there is also the vocabulary
issue.
Yes.
Yeah, editing this. There would have been way too many beeps and bleeps, and so I just had to carefully edit and mix the sound a little bit differently. So all the people who are sticklers for being, purists, we just couldn't do that. I apologize. But I encourage you, if you get the chance, to watch these films. They're all really good films. Just be sure that, they're car chases, they're violent in nature, so you may not want to show them to young children or anybody who just doesn't like violent movies, but they're all really good films. Back to Death Proof.
Back to Death Proof.
Death Proof is Quentin Tarantino's love letter to, I think, car chase movies. It's actually based on, and they actually mention it in the film, we reviewed Vanishing Point in the first part, and Vanishing Point was a big influence for this film because both films used a white Dodge Challenger, and the characters in the film actually talk about the reason they want to drive that car is it's the Vanishing Point car, because Vanishing Point is the quintessential sort of car chase movie for them. And they're stunt people, and so it's kind of paying homage also to the stunt people that work behind the scenes that create these. Kurt Russell's a villain in the film who drives his car that is quote-unquote death-proof, and he is a stuntman who uses his car to try to kill people. And so he runs into the protagonists in the film who are playing a sort of like a stuntman game with their car, and Kurt Russell decides to try to up the stakes a little bit, as you'll see in the clip. Let's check it out. I don't think you could say it any better than what Kurt Russell said. That movie, it's a fun movie to watch, but I mean, you've got where they shot a lot of those sequences were also some of them from Vanishing Point. So I mean, I watched actually Vanishing Point and then this movie, not knowing about all the similarities, and then it was just, I mean, shot just ripped from the movie that Tarantino used.
Tarantino is such a fan of film that in all of his movies, he does some kind of homage to a previous film or previous directors. That's just the nature of him, and he's having fun making those films. And he's his own director of photography most of the time, so he's not easy at giving up his power. However, his editor is
a woman.
Yes, she Sally Mankey. She did the editing for all of his films until she died in 2010. So I mean, he was really faithful with her. So.
Yeah, I really liked how this was sort of a throwback movie, but it had a very modern feel as far as the scale of the action.
Oh yeah.
It was like we've talked about how it's all escalating, and our next movie is sort of, I think, where we talked about what we wanted to do, and you brought up this film, and I had seen this film, and I think this might be a glimpse of where car chases could be going. It's a really good blend of CG and practicals. I was really surprised at the amount of practicals that they used, because there's a lot of these. They built these cars. The movie is Total Recall. It's the newer one, not the one with Arnold Schwarzenegger, but with Colin Farrell. And this does a really good job of kind of contemplating where driving may go in the future, and then once it's there, how do we create a car chase scene out of that? So let's take a look at Total Recall and see what we're seeing.
Here, you drive!
Suspension cannot be disengaged while vehicle is in operation.
What the hell are you doing? You're gonna need your seatbelt on!
Warning, mag suspension cannot be disengaged while vehicle is in operation.
They've got a lock on the vehicle. Are they clear to engage?
You are clear to engage. Got it? No, got it? Yes!
Welcome. Operating systems activated.
I think my favorite part of that is where the car, he turns off the magnetic locks and the car drops and all the music drops out. So we feel that feeling of this empty space, like you're falling through space, and then the car drops, and then the sound of music kicks back in. And
absolutely.
The music was really tailored to this sequence.
Yeah, Gregson Williams, I think, does a really fine job of capturing and enhancing and becoming part of what's happening on the screen.
Well, we're out of time. That's it. That's all we could fit in the 30 minutes we had for this show. We wanted to do so much more. Feel free to email me if you've got any suggestions at realtalkjohn@gmail.com, and tell us what your favorite car chase movies, sequences, anything. I mean, I've discussed with people all the new Batman films. I mean, you've got, like we said, Smokey the Bandit, Cannonball Run, all kinds of classic films that we could have talked about, but we just didn't have time. Be sure to check out part 1 if you haven't seen the part 1 to this, because we talk about a lot of great films in that too. Until next time, be sure to keep watching, and we'll see you soon.